Have you ever had one of those days where it feels like everything that could possibly go wrong goes wrong? It was 10 years ago, and I was a missionary in Bergen, Norway. I had nearly burnt my apartment down attempting to make lunch. I had lost my cell phone somewhere in the city and spent the entire day retracing my steps, trying to find it. And to add insult to injury, I just so happened to lean up against a building wall in the town square that had just been newly painted. The entire left side of my long black raincoat was completely covered in white paint. Seriously? In the middle of winter. I was furious. But it seemed like everything had gone wrong that day in order to put me in the right place at the right time for a young man that I was about to meet. After I dropped my coat off at the cleaners, my friend and I got on to the city train. I reminded her specifically, make sure you get off at Danmarksplads. And then we separated. I sat down to make a phone call, and by the time I was finished, I looked up, and looming out the window was Danmarksplads! I grabbed all of my things, and I ran to the door. But I was too late. I had missed my stop. Now, I was embarrassed and waving to my friend on the other side of the window when a young man at the end of the train caught my eye. And I really felt like I needed to talk to him. So I went and I sat down next to him. We had a short, friendly conversation. We exchanged phone numbers and we agreed that we would meet another day. What was interesting, though, was that when that young man walked off the train, he turned to the left and then he paused as though he was contemplating something. And then after a brief moment, he turned to the right and he slowly disappeared from view. In the coming months, my friend and I met with this young man several times. We were able to witness him overcome his addictions to drugs. He was able to separate himself from the gangs that he was entangled in. He was able to get a stable job so that he no longer had to spend homeless nights on the streets. What I didn't know until months later was that that day on the train, that young man was on his way to take his life. When asked what made him change his mind, he replied, I felt like, for the first time, someone actually saw me as a human being and not as someone who had failed. I realized in that moment that I mattered. I want to go back for just a second to that moment when the young man stepped off the train and turned left. And in that pause where he chose that he would continue to keep fighting. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose. Now, this quote comes from a man named Viktor Frankl. He was a highly respected psychiatrist in Austria until he was captured by Nazi Germany and transported to a concentration camp. He was separated from all of his loved ones, including his pregnant wife, none of which survived. He was stripped of everything that he owned. He was forced to work in awful conditions. He was abused. He was beaten. He was humiliated. He was starved. And after 3 years of living in concentration camps, he was nearly a walking corpse. Shockingly, instead of becoming apathetic and accepting that he was doomed, he chose to embrace his suffering and to find meaning in it. He states, "Everything can be taken from a man but the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." The young man on the train and Viktor Frankl had this in common. When life gave them incredibly difficult circumstances, even to the point of treading a fine line between life and death, they chose to keep fighting. Regardless of the struggle that is put in your path, remember that no one can rob you of the last of your human freedoms to choose your attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose how you will come out on the other side of the struggle. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In that response is our growth and our freedom.